evidence of Jesus. To prove Jesus did actually live, I will firstly start with historical accounts. I will be using 3 historians who lived around the time of the beginning of the Christian movement. Then before I use the Bible as a source of proof, I'll show it's genuine and true. So let's start with a non-biblical evidence. 1st and 2nd century historian Tacitus, Tacitus, lived 55 to 120 AD. He lived through it to see over a dozen reigning emperors in Judea at the time of Jesus' crucifixion. So Tacitus was and is still considered one of the greatest historians of Rome. That means, in short, he researched and cross-checked his sources. He knew folklore from actual truth. He referenced government records to be accurate with his work. Tacitus was a real skeptic, known to be throughout all his sources. He verifies Jesus' execution at the hands of Pontius Pilate, who governed Judea. Tacitus claims Jesus was the founder of Christianity. Christianity originated in Judea, and that Christianity later spread to Rome. Tacitus was also a non-believer and refers to Christianity as a superstition, a suppressible mischief. Now, the second ancient Roman historian was also a non-Christian. His name is Lucian of Samosata, a 2nd century Greek satirist. Between 120 and 180 AD, he lived. He also claims that Jesus was the founder of Christianity. Once again, as with the first historian I mentioned, Tacitus was an ancient historian who was a non-believer. Though he recognized Jesus' existence, it was known that Lucian scornfully ridiculed Christians and their Christ. And one of his writings goes as follows, the Christians, worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who introduced their novel rites and was crucified on that account. It was impressed on them by their original lawgiver that they are all brothers from the moment they are converted and deny their gods of Greece and worship their crucified sage and live after his laws. End commas. Lucian often criticized other less capable historians for being inaccurate and trying to flatter their masters or filling in the gaps with their own imaginations. Lucian was known for being true to his historical accounts. Whether he liked it or not, truth came first. He was a critical investigator. He also refers to Jesus as a lawgiver, human, a sage, not divine. He observed Jesus lived, preached and died. Now, both these historians of high regard status at their times as being accurate indeed and true. They both didn't follow Christianity and didn't bother to look seriously into Jesus' resurrection, but the final historian did. This brings us to our third historian, Flavius Josephus, lived 37 to 100 AD. Flavius lived in the time right after Christ's crucifixion by only a few years, and likely had the most accurate accounts, and likely even spoke to eyewitnesses of Jesus and also their followers. Flavius admits Jesus was crucified by Pontius Pilate, and Jesus was the founder of Christianity, who had many followers, both Jews and Gentiles. He performed wonderful works. Flavius Josephus wrote, inverted commas, there was about this time a man called Jesus, if it be lawful to call him a man, as he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men who received the truth with pleasure. He drew over many men of Jews and Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate condemned him to the cross at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, his followers did not condemn him, as he rose the third day, as the prophets had described, this and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. These men are not extinct as of this day. Closed commas. So there we have it. 3 highly praised historians who lived in those days, all writing that Jesus did actually exist, live, preach and die on the cross, with one actually stating that he rose on the third day, exactly what is written in our Bibles. Actually, another fact, there is much more evidence that Jesus lived than anybody else of importance at that time. Now, before I use our Bible as evidence for Jesus, I'll just mention that other religions recognize Jesus too. The Quran mentions Jesus. This is the Muslim religion. Jesus is described as a prophet and a preacher of love and peace. Without getting off topic, I criticize Islam. I'll just mention briefly a few points. There are great numbers of Muslims converting to Christianity at this day and age. There are many postings on YouTube with startling testimonies. And secondly, Muslims are forced into that religion and have been known to be killed if they ever denied or try leaving. They even have been known to be imprisoned, beaten and tortured. There are many accounts of this. And thirdly, Muslims' God is Muhammad, and he was just a man, and he died and he was never raised to life again, not like Jesus. Now, another important fact that most of us overlook, and it's on our walls and on our phones, it's the humble calendar. The year Christ was born is recorded over history as the year 0. So we know this is year 2020. Then Jesus was born 2020 years ago. Therefore, Jesus' life was that memorable that we started time with his birth year. Not only that, but there is Easter and Christmas every year to celebrate his birth and death. Already the evidence is overwhelming in favour that Jesus did actually live and die, and we now have the calendar to prove it also. Now let's think about it. Did we design the calendar around any other person of great significance, or around any other person? For example, did we choose a famous king? There have been many kings to rise and fall through history. Examples are Nimrod of Babylon, or even King David of Israel. The answer is no. Then what about someone else famous? What about great Alexander the Great, who conquered over many nations? The answer again is no. Well, not even great philosophers like Socrates. No, no, and no. Mankind chose a man named Jesus. That reveals to us then that Jesus was considered much greater than all kings, warriors, philosophers, and great thinkers. Still not convinced or wanting more proof? I have more, and I'll share it with you. Okay, now we will start dissecting the Bible and pull up some intriguing factual proof. Now, before we dive in, just imagine in today's times if somebody commits a crime, let's say robbed the bank and gets away. Now, one of the first things the police would do, apart from checking CCTV camera surveillance, is they seek after eyewitnesses. The more the better. Let's say they get 3 eyewitnesses. Now, what you will find is that each story will vary. That's 3 different eyewitness accounts. Now, that's considered normal, as one eyewitness may say that the thief was about 6 foot tall with a limp and he ran off. The second eyewitness states that the assailant was much taller, who ran with lightning speed. And the third eyewitness states the assailant walked briskly right past where he was standing on the street, and he was wearing a balaclava, holding a briefcase, and concealing what appeared to be a weapon under his grey jacket. As you see, everyone has a different account as to what they believe they saw at each stage of the event that took place. This is normal, though the fact is they all noticed the same man and described him in that moment they eyewitnessed him. Now, there is actual eyewitness accounts written in the Bible about Jesus from different eyewitnesses. Let's pull up Mark. The book of Mark is estimated to have been written 40 years after Jesus' resurrection. The book of Matthew is written by Matthew about 50 years after the resurrection. Luke was written 55 years after, Acts 60 years after, and John 65 years after. All books written by eyewitnesses, you will find they all differ slightly. They all are considered to be reliable eyewitness accounts, especially due to the fact they all genuinely differ. Now, the key words here are genuinely differ. Therefore, someone hasn't fabricated a story and asked several people to write the same story. In police interrogations, if 2 or more people have strikingly similar or identical accounts of an event, they suspect conspiracy and false evidence being submitted. This often occurs when 2 suspected criminals of a crime are questioned in 2 separate rooms. So you see, now we have confidence in the Bible's written testimonials. Not only do we have reliable testimonies, did you know that the Bible is largely prophecy? Yes, and did you know that all prophecies, which are predictions, have all come to pass? Yes, every one so far. Now that has to be something worth your attention, not only to see that Jesus was announced many, many years before he was actually born, though you can even see the times we are in today. Example, look at Israel. As predicted or prophesied in the Bible, God will make their land fertile again and call his people from all four corners of the world back to their land. Now Jews are migrating back to Israel in thousands. Also, miraculously, the Dead Sea is for the first time that we have ever known having fish return to its waters. So we are